Why does the world look away when it's your skin that needs saving? That question had followed Imani Reed every single night since she turned 15. She didn't ask it out loud anymore. Not because she found the answer, but because she learned that silence was safer. The city didn't care much for homeless girls, and it cared even less for black ones. Dallas was cold that winter. The kind of cold that didn't just touch your skin. It bit through your bones, whispered that you didn't belong here. Imani sat behind the diner dumpster, hugging a blanket that used to be pink but had turned gray from years of dirt and rain. Her fingers were stiff, her stomach empty, and her hope almost gone. Sometimes she'd close her eyes and pretend she was back home, before her mama died, before the foster homes, before everything turned ugly. But pretending was dangerous too. The streets didn't forgive dreamers. That night, the alley smelled of spoiled grease and wet cardboard. Cars rushed by the main road a few blocks away, their lights flashing like ghosts of lives she'd never live. She looked down at the little photo tucked in her pocket, her mother smiling in a nurse uniform, the only thing she'd managed to keep when she ran away from the last shelter. "You'd be proud, Mama," she whispered, though she knew that wasn't true. Pride didn't exist in survival. A sound startled her. A faint thump, then another. She froze. It wasn't unusual to hear strange things in the night. Rats, bottles, sometimes drunks fighting. But this sound was different, distant, heavy, like metal against metal. Then silence. Imani pulled the blanket tighter and peered toward the street. Her heart raced as she debated whether to stay or check it out. Curiosity could get you killed out here. But something inside her said, "Go." She moved cautiously, her sneakers soaking through puddles. The wind whipped harder as she reached the corner where the narrow alley opened into a deserted road. There, down the hill, she saw it. Smoke. Thick, gray, and curling into the winter sky. Her heartbeat picked up. She squinted. Headlights flickered through the fog, one still burning, the other shattered. A car. A wreck. She could barely make out its shape, black, shiny, crushed against a tree. For a moment, fear held her still. Maybe it's just an abandoned car, she thought. But then, a cry. A faint, trembling sound. Not an adult. A baby. Imani's breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. She sprinted down the hill. Each step sent gravel sliding under her feet, her arms pumping against the cold. The closer she got, the clearer she heard it. Soft whimpers breaking into desperate wails. The car was mangled, its front crushed like paper. Steam hissed from the hood. Inside, through the cracked windshield, she saw a man, slumped over the steering wheel, blood streaked down his face. The baby's cry came from the back seat, trapped in a car seat, tiny hands flailing in panic. "Hey, can you hear me?" she shouted, slapping the driver's window. No response. Smoke seeped out. Panic burned in her chest. She looked around. No other cars, no lights, no people. Just her. Just this. The baby's cry grew louder. Okay, she muttered, her breath shaking. "You're gonna be okay, little one. Hold on." She yanked at the back door. Locked. She tried the handle again, harder this time. Nothing. She grabbed a loose rock from the ground and smashed it against the window. It cracked but didn't break. Again, until the glass shattered. Shards sliced into her palm, blood dripping down her wrist. But she didn't stop. She reached through, unbuckled the car seat straps, and pulled the crying baby close against her chest. The baby's cheeks were cold, his small breaths quick. "Shh, I got you," she whispered, rocking him slightly. Then she looked back at the driver. He was still, head leaning against the airbag. His watch gleamed under the dashboard light, expensive, gold, and covered in blood. She didn't know who he was, but he didn't look like anyone she'd ever meet in her world. "Sir, wake up," she shouted. Nothing. Smoke thickened, burning her throat. She coughed, shielding the baby with her arm. She couldn't leave him there, no matter who he was. She She went around to the driver's side, yanked the door, jammed. Her fingers slipped. She pushed harder until her muscles screamed. Still jammed. God help me, she muttered. She grabbed a piece of metal from the wreck and pried at the hinge until it gave a loud pop. She tugged again. This time the door creaked open just enough. She slid her arm around his shoulders, pulled with everything she had. He groaned faintly. Alive. Come on, she said through clenched teeth. You're not dying on me tonight. Her knees buckled, but she managed to drag him a few feet from the car. The baby whimpered against her chest and the smell of smoke filled her lungs. Behind them, the car sparked. She looked up. Flames flickered near the hood. Her pulse spiked. She stumbled back farther, trying to keep them away from the heat. By the time she laid the man down, he was breathing, shallow but steady. She looked at his face, trying to memorize it before the night swallowed it again. That's when headlights flashed behind her. Blue and red. Police sirens. Relief. For 1 second. Then dread. Her heart sank. She was holding a white man's baby, standing over his bloody body, next to a luxury car she clearly didn't belong near. The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the night. Put your hands where we can see them, a voice shouted. Imani froze. Wait, he was, hands up! She clutched the crying baby tighter, tears welling in her eyes. Please, I was helping him. But the flashlight beams hit her face, and what they saw wasn't a hero. It was a homeless black girl holding a billionaire's baby in the middle of a wreck. If you're watching this and your heart already feels heavy, hit that like button, because sometimes the ones we judge the fastest are the ones saving lives when no one else dares to. Imani's knees hit the frozen dirt. The police officers surrounded her, guns drawn, voices cutting through the cold air. I said drop the baby, now. She couldn't even breathe. He's just a baby. Please, I didn't do anything. Drop him. She slowly knelt down, tears freezing on her cheeks. She placed the baby on the ground, careful not to let him touch the glass. The baby whimpered, reaching for her, as if he somehow knew she was the only one who meant him no harm. The taller officer cuffed her hands behind her back, the cold metal biting into her skin. You're under arrest for attempted kidnapping and vehicle theft, he said. Imani's voice broke. No, that's not what happened. He was in the car. It crashed. I pulled him out. The other officer checked the unconscious man. He's alive. Looks bad, though. Ambulance is 5 minutes out, the taller one said, glancing back at her. What were you doing here anyway? I live here, she cried. I sleep by the alley. I just heard the crash. He shook his head, unmoved. Sure you did. They shoved her toward the patrol car. The baby's cries pierced through the chaos, louder, desperate. She turned her head toward him as they pushed her inside. Please, somebody hold him right. He's cold. But no one was listening. Inside the police car, the air smelled of old coffee and worn leather. Imani pressed her forehead against the glass, watching the flashing lights dance across the man's still body. Her heart twisted. Why did I even go there? A paramedic rushed in, lifting the baby. He's okay, just scared, she heard one of them say. Another loaded the man into an ambulance. Through the blur of lights, she caught a glimpse of his face again. Blood dried on his jawline, wedding ring glinting under the ambulance beam. Something in that moment told her this was far from over. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights hit her like judgment. They took her fingerprints, her shoes, her blanket, everything. She sat in the holding room, staring at the wall. No lawyer, no call, just the echo of that baby's cry in her mind. Hours later, a man in a suit walked in. His voice was calm but sharp. You were found with Grant Whitmore's infant son. Do you realize who that is? She shook her head. He leaned closer. No, sir. Grant Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Global, one of the richest men in the country. And you expect us to believe you just happened to find him on the side of the road? Imani met his eyes, scared but unbroken. Believe what you want. I know what I did. He stared at her a moment, almost curious, then smirked. "We'll see what Mr. Whitmore says when he wakes up." Her stomach turned cold. When he wakes up? Because if he didn't, no one would ever know the truth. By sunrise, Dallas had already chosen its villain. The morning news rolled with flashing images, the wrecked Bentley, police lights reflecting off broken glass, and in the center of it all, a mugshot of a terrified black teenage girl. Homeless teen attempts to kidnap billionaire's infant after car crash. The headlines screamed across every major network. Imani Reed sat in a detention cell, watching her face loop across the old TV bolted to the wall. Her body trembled, not from the cold this time, but from disbelief. How could the world twist mercy into crime? The reporter's voice echoed. Sources say Grant Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Global, remains in critical condition after a late-night accident near I-35. The alleged suspect, an unidentified teenage girl, was found holding his infant son at the scene. The guard turned the volume down, muttering, "Crazy world. Never thought I'd see something like that." Imani wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't what they said, that she didn't steal, didn't hurt anyone, didn't even think twice before risking her life. But she'd already learned how little words mattered when your skin didn't fit the story they wanted to tell. She turned to the small window slit, watching daylight spill over the gray wall. Her throat ached from crying, but her pride wouldn't let her break again. "You did the right thing," she told herself. "You just saved a man and his baby. That's gotta mean something." But right now it meant nothing. Across town, in a sleek hospital room surrounded by machines, Grant Whitmore's chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. Tubes, beeping monitors, the faint hum of air conditioning, the sound of survival money could buy. Beside his bed sat a woman in a navy coat, Vanessa Doyle, his personal attorney. She held her phone tight as the TV repeated the same footage from the night before. "Sir, you've caused a storm," she whispered under her breath. "And you don't even know it." She turned off the screen just as the doctor entered. "He's stable," the doctor said softly. "He suffered a concussion and a few broken ribs. He'll wake soon." Vanessa nodded. "When he does, we'll need his statement immediately. The press is running wild." As soon as the doctor left, she looked at Grant's unconscious face. The man had built empires, but he also had enemies, and not all of them wore suits. Yet no one could have predicted this. A billionaire nearly dying in a car wreck, rescued by a homeless black girl, then turning into a national scandal overnight. At the same time, social media was on fire. Dallas crash. Homeless girl. Whitmore baby. Half the internet called Imani a thief. The other half called her a hero. Conspiracy theories spread like wildfire, some claiming she was part of a ransom plot, others saying the police were covering up racial bias. But no one knew the truth. No one cared to ask. Back in her cell, Imani's head snapped up when the metal door creaked open. The guard motioned. "You got a visitor." She blinked. "Who?" He didn't answer. She followed, barefoot on the cold floor, her heart pounding. Maybe someone believed her. Maybe this was her chance. When she stepped into the small interview room, she saw a tall man in a gray suit. His expression was unreadable. He didn't look like a cop. He looked more powerful, calm, sharp, used to being obeyed. He set his briefcase on the table. "Ms. Reed, my name's Daniel Price. I represent the Whitmore family." Imani's throat tightened. "How's the baby?" "He's fine," Daniel replied, his tone flat. "No injuries." Relief flickered across her face. "And the man?" "Mr. Whitmore is recovering. He hasn't regained full consciousness yet." Imani nodded, whispering, "Good." Daniel studied her, the cuts on her hands, the exhaustion in her eyes. "The police report says you were found with the baby in your arms outside the wreck, is that correct?" "Yes, sir," she said. "I heard the crash. I ran down there and I pulled them out. That's all I did." He leaned forward slightly. And you expect the world to believe a teenage girl just happened to be nearby on a deserted back road in the middle of the night? Imani's jaw tightened. Believe what you want. I didn't do this for attention. For the first time, something like respect flickered in his gaze. Brief, but real. You understand the situation you're in, he said. The media's tearing you apart. If Mr. Whitmore decides to press charges, you could be facing prison. Imani swallowed hard. For saving a life? Daniel hesitated. The world doesn't always reward good intentions, Ms. Reed. He closed his briefcase, stood, and buttoned his jacket. You should get some rest. We'll be in touch. As he left, Imani stared at the reflection in the glass wall. A homeless girl turned headline, caught between truth and power. Somewhere in that same moment, miles away, Grant's eyes flickered open, and everything began to change. The hospital room was quiet, except for the slow beep of a heart monitor. Grant Whitmore blinked against the harsh light, his throat dry. His mind was foggy, like trying to remember a dream that kept slipping away. He turned his head slightly. Pain shot through his ribs. Mr. Whitmore, can you hear me? A nurse asked gently. He groaned softly, nodding. My son? The nurse smiled with relief. Your baby's safe. He's in the pediatric wing. Grant exhaled shakily, sinking back against the pillow. What happened? You were in an accident. It's a miracle you both survived. Grant frowned. Fragments of the night drifted back. The slick road, headlights cutting through fog, a flash of fear, and then nothing. Who found us? The nurse hesitated. A young woman. She pulled you both from the car before it caught fire. Grant's eyes opened wider. A woman? Yes, sir. She's currently in custody. He blinked. Custody? For what? Before the nurse could answer, the door opened, and Vanessa Doyle stepped in. Grant, thank God you're awake. He turned toward her weakly. Vanessa, what's going on? She took a deep breath. There's a lot of noise around the accident. The girl who found you, she's homeless. The police say she might have tried to steal the car. Grant stared at her, confused. That's ridiculous. She saved me. Vanessa's voice softened, cautious. I believe you, but the media doesn't. They've already turned it into something ugly. Grant rubbed his forehead. What's her name? Imani Reed. He repeated it under his breath. Imani. The name felt unfamiliar but heavy, like he owed it something. Vanessa hesitated, then lowered her tone. Grant, we need to be careful here. You're one of the most public figures in this city. If this turns into a racial scandal, Vanessa, he cut in, voice steadying. A girl risked her life for me and my son. You think I'm going to let her rot in jail for that? Vanessa sighed. It's not that simple. The police report. I don't care about reports, he snapped, pain flashing across his face as he sat up. Get her out. She stared at him for a long second. This wasn't the same cold executive she knew. The man who fired people by text and avoided charity galas because empathy didn't pay bills. Something about this accident had cracked that steel wall inside him. He looked away, whispering almost to himself. She could have walked away, but she didn't. As Vanessa left to make the call, Grant turned toward the window. The city lights of Dallas glittered like distant stars against the glass. He thought about his son's tiny cries in the dark, about the stranger who carried him through fire, and for the first time in years, Grant Whitmore felt something he couldn't buy: gratitude. But gratitude would soon collide with a world that didn't care about truth, only perception. Because Grant fought to defend Imani's name, someone else was already working to destroy it. Who gets to decide what the truth looks like on the front page? By midday, the story had already become something else. News vans lined the street outside the precinct. Phones recorded. People shouted questions into cameras while other people shouted answers back. The scene looked like something from a different life. not the one Imani had been living under bridges and in church foyers. Inside the station, lights hummed, and a dry heat made everything feel smaller. Imani sat on a metal bench, her wrists still marked where the cuffs had been, the cut on her palm raw and sticky. She watched footage loop on a small monitor, her own face blown up and called a threat. A dozen different headlines marched across the screen. Kidnap attempt? Billionaire's baby rescued? Who is the girl in the mugshot? A chorus of anger and curiosity she had no part in. Outside, someone started a rumor, the kind that spreads faster than facts. A clip from a night vision camera on a nearby business was edited and shared. Soundless, sped up and framed as proof she'd smashed a window for gain. The edited clip got 1 million views that afternoon. The unedited truth, that she smashed the glass to get the baby out, was buried in a box of files no one had wanted to open yet. Detective Harris watched the camera feed, jaw tight. He had been on the road that night, the first uniform on the scene. He'd seen smoke, the smashed car, the tiny fist reaching from the car seat. He'd seen Imani pull the baby out. He had placed her in handcuffs because the dispatcher called in a report of a possible abducting suspect. Procedure, he told himself. Procedure and the political pressure that followed. A man with a briefcase, Daniel Price, Whitmore Family Counsel, arrived at the station with a calm that felt practiced. He spoke to the desk sergeant with a tone that implied things could be fixed if handled the right way. Daniel did not scold. He delegated. He left police with a list of talking points and a request that the incident be handled with discretion. When Vanessa Doyle, Whitmore's attorney and longtime image manager, got the call, she moved fast. She called PR. She called legal. She called the hospital. "We control the message," she said into her phone, voice low and hard, then asked for a list of every camera within a 2-mile radius. Her idea of control was a press release drafted to emphasize danger, not grace. "This is a kidnap attempt until proven otherwise," read the first line. The memo was short and effective. Headlines followed. Reverend Carter, watching the coverage from the church kitchen, slammed his palm against the counter until his knuckles ached. "They're doing to her what they always do." He called a friend on the force, pressed for information, then walked across the room to where the volunteers were packing hot meals for the street. He thought of the girl who once tried to keep her hair dry under a plastic bag. "We don't leave our own," he said. He began making calls of his own. In a cramped conference room at Whitmore Global, Linda Holt, head of public relations, paced. She preferred to think in clean statements and crisis flowcharts. Vanessa wanted the story suppressed. Linda wanted it buried under sympathy for Grant and concern for the baby. "We'll paint a narrative of danger," Linda said. "Make people fear a world without our order." Vanessa listened, jaw tight. She drafted a statement that would read like concern and caution, while subtly undermining the homeless girl who'd become the scapegoat. Meanwhile, social media did the job Linda and Vanessa hoped for. Comment sections filled with assumptions. People who had never met Imani offered up verdicts. Some demanded immediate punishment. A few thousand clapped. The kind of applause that asks no questions. Date. Harris sat with the body cam footage again. He could see the truth, the way Imani struggled with the window, the way the baby clung to her like a lifeline. He could hear the breath in the footage, the wet coughs. But the official report, written under pressure, painted her as a suspect until proven otherwise, and the narrative built itself around those words. At the hospital, Grant's soft groan turned into a quick, confused whisper. "Where's Caleb?" Vanessa had told him the infant was safe. That should have been the end of it. But when the nurse mentioned the girl who'd pulled them out, Grant's brow furrowed. He had a fogged, distant memory, a small face in the blue smoke, a voice humming something he couldn't place. Vanessa, document ready, rushed into his room. "Grant, I need you to know how we'll handle press. You're a public figure." Her tone was not unkind. It was survival dressed as advice. "We will provide statements. You will not sign anything impulsively. but we do need to clear any suggestion that your family was at risk because of negligence." Grant listened, confusion and residual gratitude warring on his face. The baby's cry from down the hall pulled at him. He thought about his son's warm weight in his arms. He thought about the girl who had saved him. The part of him that had always kept people at a distance felt tender and unsteady. At the precinct, Imani had been offered a lawyer, a public defender who smelled of coffee and exhaustion. He sat in front of her with a small notebook. "They'll ask you the same questions. Be honest. Keep calm." He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the shock, the line of patience she kept under a thin, cracked smile. "You did what was right," he said quietly. "We can fight this." Outside the station, protesters gathered on both sides of the argument. One group holding signs that read "Justice for Whitmore," another group handing out flyers. "She saved a baby. Why punish her?" Cameras loved the contrast. Editors loved the drama. Imani thought of the baby's small hand, of the way he had fallen asleep in her arms once she had stopped rocking him. She repeated a lullaby under her breath, the one she hummed to children at the shelter. It was a song her mama had sung. It was the same melody that had soothed the baby when everything else was loud. A nurse at the hospital passing through the hallway heard that melody drifting across the city's airwaves, a humming that had no microphone, only a memory. She stopped mid-step and the sound lodged in her mind. It was a lullaby she had heard years ago in another context, a little different, sung by an elegant woman who used to volunteer late nights. The nurse's breath hitched. She moved toward Grant's room with a stack of charts. In her hand, a memory began to pull a thread taut, a name, a face, a night that must be remembered. Across town, a producer at a morning show clicked a link and watched a clip of the silent footage again. He leaned forward, brow furrowed. There, in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was someone in a navy coat. The same coat a certain volunteer had worn in dozens of shelter photos. He paused the feed and zoomed in. On his screen, the shadow of a woman bent over the infant in the seat, convulsing hands trying to free a strap. The camera caught everything, even a small movement he couldn't explain, the way the woman's lips moved as if singing. He hit record. Imani was alone in a waiting room, chin on her chest, when a guard opened the door and said, "You got a call." She almost didn't answer. Her voice was a whisper. "Who is it?" The guard held out a slip of paper. On it, someone had written 2 words. "Hospital, Wesley Children's, ask for Nurse Hall." Imani's breath stopped. She had done what she knew how to do. Now the world had 2 choices. Find the truth, or keep the story that was already loud enough to drown it out. And as she rose, hand still sticky with blood from the glass, none of them yet realized what a single nurse's memory would set in motion. What song could matter so much that a whole room stops and listens? Grant Whitmore's memory came back in pieces. A jolt of light, a smell of lemon cleaner, a laugh softened by dusk. He had not expected memory to be a weapon. He had always thought of memory as a warm, private thing. But now it surfaced in the hospital like a photograph someone left in the rain. The first complete image was of a woman in a red coat, hands busy, hair tucked behind her ears. Her laugh was the kind that made people forget to be afraid. Her name, Evelyn Whitmore, had been a soft defiance in Grant's life. She worked to make his world less hollow. She had a habit of tapping rhythm on any table until a tune appeared. She hummed lullabies that had a way of stopping crying quicker than medicine. Grant remembered Evelyn's hands, careful, quick, always reaching for the small things other people ignored. A child's glove on a bench, a man's dropped newspaper. She volunteered on Tuesday nights at a small shelter on the edge of downtown. He had once teased her about bringing home too many stray sandwiches. She had answered, "They eat better when I remember their names." That night, the night that now burned in headlines and court filings, had not been an ordinary night. Grant and Evelyn had been at a fundraiser, not the kind that patched holes, but the kind that wrote checks and made theater. Evelyn had insisted they leave early to help with a late dinner at the shelter. Go, she had said. They'll need a hot plate. Besides, the boy who sings will be there. They drove together, slow, with Caleb sleeping in the car seat behind them, a knitted blanket pulled up to his chin. It had been snowing in thin sheets, the roads glossy and treacherous. Grant remembered arguing about work, his usual defense about deadlines. Evelyn looked at him with a look he had always feared, not anger, but sadness. If you don't change, she had said, your son will grow up thinking life is only success on paper. It was the kind of argument that could have ended the night in any number of ways. They left the shelter under a sky that tasted like metal. The tires hit a patch of black ice near the overpass. Grant remembered the car fishtailing, a horn blaring, then the world folding in on itself. He remembered consciousness like a visit, all the flashes, a bright white shirt, Evelyn's hand on his chest, a voice that broke in a way he had never heard before. In the next memory, he watched Evelyn hold Caleb, humming soft notes. Sleep, little light, she sang. We'll keep you safe. Her voice braided with the hum of traffic and the sweet buzz of neon. There was a man near the overpass in a blue jacket who walked closer and then away. A shadow that might have been someone else, or a fruitless memory. Grant had eyed the side mirror as the car spun. He had seen a pickup slide by, slow and indifferent, its driver's face a blur. He couldn't tell later if that blur had been a miracle or a threat. He had seen the sky lean, invisible fingers pulling them sideways. He remembered smelling smoke and then feeling hands on his chest, a small body crying, and a woman with rough hands cutting plastic through glass. She hummed a lullaby that sounded like Evelyn's but cracked differently. The song soothed the baby into sleep as the sirens wailed. When Grant returned to the present, he pressed a palm to the hospital sheet as if he could press his memory back into place. Evelyn's laugh, that small sound, linked to the lullaby the nurse had said she'd heard years ago. The thought tugged like a thread. Vanessa and Daniel were practical. They wanted statements. They wanted to shape the narrative into neat, controllable lines. But Grant's memory would not be shaped. It wanted names and faces. It wanted to tell him what he had not wanted to hear. At home, in a leather box no one had touched, sat a photograph, Evelyn with Caleb on her lap at a shelter event, the two of them lit by a cheap flash and better love. Grant had not been able to look at it for months after she died. He had thought of it as a private monument. Now he wanted to see it the way he saw everything else, with a gut check, a measure. He asked a nurse to fetch the photograph from his bedside table. His hands shook as he unfolded the worn corner. He traced Evelyn's smile with a fingertip. There it was, the same lullaby in her mouth and the same little dimple on Caleb's cheek. He put his thumb over the corner and a line of memory split his chest. The hospital room seemed to close around him. Outside, a reporter shouted into a camera, a microphone leaning in like a question mark. Inside, Grant's recollection fastened on one image he hadn't wanted to see, a taillight in the side mirror that glowed too steady, too deliberate. Not random traffic, but a vehicle that had been following them. He reached for the call button and asked for any traffic cameras on the stretch of road. Vanessa frowned. "We don't release that stuff easily," she said. But Grant pushed because the line of flame in his memory had a direction. It followed something. When the nurse left, a small data printout arrived from the hospital security system. A junior technician had been helpful, a kindness that cost nothing but time. He handed Grant a grainy image, a car behind them on the overpass, its silhouette oddly familiar. The technician squinted. "That looks like one of Whitmore Global's contractor vans," he said, surprised, then cringed as if he'd spoken a taboo. Grant's chest tightened. He had always believed accidents were accidents, but the image landed like a stone in his gut. The memory shifted from fog to a line of intent. Someone had been there behind them. Someone who shouldn't have been. He pressed his hand against his forehead, feeling the migraine come on. Evelyn's face floated up, her last laugh like a bell. He whispered, "Evelyn." Outside the hospital window, a car pulled up. The driver stepped out. Not a rescuer, but a face Grant had logged 100 times in boardroom pictures. A contractor foreman who had argued for a particular demolition plan last year. He had seen that man at briefings, smiling for cameras while workers did the work. Grant swallowed. A single question took hold, a needle pressing toward a truth that threatened everything he'd built. Was this accident an accident at all? The answer would take time, but the memory wouldn't wait. And in the quiet between heartbeats, a nurse in the next corridor remembered Evelyn's name from a shelter roster she kept in her wallet for the holiday drives. A phone vibrated on a desk a mile away. A young producer opened his app and watched the paused clip again. He tapped a finger over the screen, zoomed, and froze on a logo on the contractor van. The logo matched a company with links to the Whitmore supply chain. The thread was pulling, and someone, somewhere, didn't like threads being pulled. What happens when truth hides inside the wrong hands? The morning news played on every waiting room TV. The headlines hadn't changed, but the tone had. Words like kidnapping and suspect had been replaced by phrases like unidentified woman saves baby and mystery good Samaritan. Someone, somewhere, had started asking questions the lawyers didn't control. Detective Harris scrolled through his inbox, and one message caught his eye. No subject line, no sender name. He clicked it and saw a short, shaky clip attached. The video started in static. Then came the glow of headlights, a spinning blur, and the unmistakable shape of a woman pulling a baby from a car seat. No sound, just movement. But even in silence, truth has a sound. He replayed the footage 3 times before noticing the timestamp. It matched the accident's official record down to the second. The camera angle wasn't from traffic cams or police dash cam. It was shot from a cell phone across the highway. Someone had been there before the cops arrived. He printed a still frame and stared at it. The woman's hands, trembling but precise, the way she wrapped the child in her coat. And behind her, a second figure standing near the edge of the wreckage. Harris leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The figure wasn't helping. It was watching. At the same moment, Grant Whitmore sat upright in his hospital bed, a laptop open. His face was pale, his breathing uneven. A tech assistant had slipped him an encrypted copy of the same video, saying it came from a whistleblower who didn't want their name attached. Grant clicked play. There it was. The moment his world had burned. But this time, it didn't look like fate. It looked like setup. Vanessa entered mid-video. "You shouldn't be watching that," she said, voice sharp. "I shouldn't have to," Grant replied quietly. "That's my wife's last night alive." Her jaw stiffened. Emotions cloud judgment. Maybe judgment clouded emotion for too long, he said, eyes never leaving the screen. When the shadowed figure came into view, Grant froze. The face was blurry, but the jacket had a company logo stitched on the sleeve. Whitmore Global Engineering, the very branch his father's board had outsourced 2 years ago. Vanessa stepped closer. "Grant, you don't know what you're seeing." He looked up slowly. "I know exactly what I'm seeing. One of our people walking away while my wife died." In that instant, the weight of his empire shifted. The lines between privilege and power snapped in his chest. For the first time in years, Grant didn't feel like a Whitmore. He felt like a man trapped inside his own legacy. Across town, Imani sat in Reverend Carter's office. She wore borrowed clothes, jeans and a faded hoodie that smelled faintly of detergent and hope. Her eyes were red but clear. Carter poured her a glass of water and said softly, "They're starting to see it wasn't you." Imani shook her head. "They don't see me. They see a story." Carter leaned forward. "Then let's change how it's told." He turned his laptop toward her, showing the same viral clip. "Someone leaked this to the press this morning. Look." She watched herself on screen, glass shattering, fire glowing, her arms wrapping the baby like instinct. She gasped when she saw the second figure. "That's not the paramedics. Who is that?" "Good question," Carter said, lowering the volume. "Someone close to the accident. Someone who shouldn't have been there. By afternoon, the clip had reached every major outlet. Half the country called her a hero. The other half still argued online, suspicious and divided. But for the first time, her voice was no longer alone. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Grant met the nurse, Hall, who had called the precinct. She looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly, "I worked at Haven Shelter before your wife passed. Evelyn used to sing lullabies there every Tuesday night. She knew that girl." Grant blinked. "Knew her?" "Yes. Imani. Evelyn used to call her the voice with the cracked halo. She said that girl carried too much sorrow for one soul." Grant's throat went dry. He turned back to the TV. The same lullaby played faintly in the background of the clip. His wife's voice echoed through memory, intertwining with Imani's. "You mean?" The nurse nodded. "Your wife taught her that song." Vanessa stood frozen by the door, her phone buzzing nonstop. She didn't interrupt, but the calculation behind her silence was unmistakable. She was already considering what this connection could mean for the company, for its image, its investors, its control. When Grant asked for Imani's location, Vanessa tried to block him. "You can't just walk into a police matter, Grant." He stared at her coldly. "I can walk into anything my money built." Outside, clouds rolled low, heavy as judgment. Reporters gathered at the hospital gates. Somewhere, a man in a gray coat deleted footage from a company drive, then placed a single call. "He's looking into it," the voice said. "Handle it before it grows legs." And as Grant stepped out of the hospital, determination in his stride and the sound of his wife's lullaby haunting his ears, two black cars pulled away from a parking garage downtown, heading straight toward the precinct where Imani sat waiting. The truth was out there now. And someone was about to bury it again. How much would you risk to repay a debt no one believes you owe? By nightfall, the city looked like a movie set after the crew had gone home. Wet pavement, distant sirens, lights blinking over empty streets. Imani sat on the steps of the church beside Reverend Carter, the borrowed hoodie pulled over her head. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from exhaustion, from remembering too much. Carter handed her a cup of coffee and said, "You did more for that child than most people would have done for their own blood." She whispered, "Doesn't matter if nobody believes it." He smiled faintly. "Belief's the slowest truth to travel, but it gets there." A black SUV rolled up beside the church. The door opened, and Grant Whitmore stepped out, not in a suit this time, but in jeans, a hospital wristband still clinging to his arm. His face looked older, heavier with something like guilt. Imani stood. "You came here?" He nodded once. "To say thank you, and to tell you the story isn't what they're making it." Her voice cracked. "They called me a thief." "I know," he said quietly. "And I let them." Carter glanced between them, unsure whether to speak. The night air buzzed with something unspoken, grief, disbelief, maybe destiny. Grant stepped closer. "You saved my son, you saved me, but I think you also saved a truth I was too cowardly to see." He handed her an envelope, legal papers, neat and heavy. "This clears your record, no charges." I had them dropped. Imani blinked. "That easy?" "Not easy," he said. "Expensive." But she didn't reach for the envelope. She asked instead, "Why me? Why are you here?" Grant looked down, searching for the right words. "Because the lullaby you sang, it was my wife's. You learned it from her." Imani's breath caught. "Evelyn?" "Yes. She used to talk about you. Said you had a gift, but the world didn't know what to do with it." The mention of Evelyn's name broke her composure. Tears came, quiet but raw. Grant's voice softened. "I thought I'd lost every part of her. Turns out she left a piece behind. In you." Before she could answer, headlights flashed at the end of the block. Two dark cars slowed to a stop. Doors opened and 3 men in suits stepped out. One called out, "Mr. Whitmore, we need to talk, now." Grant's jaw tightened. He recognized them, his own corporate security team, Vanessa's men. Carter whispered, "This doesn't look like gratitude." The tallest man approached. "Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Doyle asked us to bring you in. Company emergency." "I'm in the middle of something," Grant said coldly. "This is non-negotiable." Imani stepped back. One of the men glanced at her and muttered, "That's the girl? Guess the news didn't lie." Grant's eyes went sharp. "Watch your mouth." But the tension broke like glass. One man reached inside his jacket, not for a gun, but for a paper. "You're being placed under protective directive. Company policy while internal matters are reviewed." Grant ripped the document in half. "You don't control me." "Then you're a liability," the man replied flatly. Before anyone could react, one of the cars reversed sharply, blocking the church steps. Carter moved instinctively in front of Imani, but Grant grabbed her wrist. "Get inside now!" The air thickened with panic. Car doors slamming, voices shouting. Imani stumbled into the church as glass shattered behind her. Grant turned, furious. "You're doing this in front of a church?" The men hesitated, but their leader said, "We don't take orders from you anymore, Grant. Vanessa does." Lightning cracked above them, and the sky opened in a cold, heavy rain. Grant stood between the men and the church door, unarmed but unshaken. Imani pressed against the stained glass window, watching. Reverend Carter whispered a prayer. The men advanced one step at a time, as if rehearsed. Grant didn't move. Then, a single gunshot echoed from somewhere unseen. Everyone froze. The leader fell to one knee, clutching his arm. The others ducked behind the SUV. Grant turned toward the shadows and saw a figure standing at the corner of the church fence, holding a smoking pistol and wearing a gray hoodie. The figure lowered the gun and said softly, "You don't know me, but you will." Grant's eyes widened. The voice was female. The streetlights flickered, and before he could step closer, she disappeared into the rain. Who shoots to protect? And why would a stranger risk everything for two people she's never met? The night smelled like smoke and rain. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but by the time they arrived, the shooters were gone. The man who'd been hit, one of Vanessa's guards, was rushed to the hospital, muttering about orders and cleaning up a mess. Grant stood soaked on the church steps, blood and rain mixing on his hands. Imani crouched beside him, heart pounding. Reverend Carter held the baby close, whispering prayers he barely remembered. "Grant," Imani said breathlessly, "that woman, she saved you." He looked down the street, toward the alley where she'd vanished. "No," he murmured. "She saved the truth." Hours later, inside the church, Grant sat in the flicker of candlelight, his wet hair slicked back, his mind burning with questions. Who was she? How'd she know to be there? Carter sighed. "Dallas is full of people who see more than they say." Imani hesitated. She looked familiar. The way she moved, like she'd been watching us for days. Grant leaned forward. "Maybe she has." The baby stirred, and for the first time since the crash, Grant smiled. A small human smile that made him look less like a billionaire and more like a man learning what pain costs. Imani watched him closely. "You're not used to being on the run, huh?" He gave a low laugh. "I'm used to giving orders, not dodging bullets." Carter stood. "I'm gonna make some calls. If that was corporate security, you both need a safe place tonight." Imani looked up sharply. "Safe? For who? Him or me? 'Cause I remember what happened last time I trusted police lights." The words hit Grant harder than she intended. He nodded slowly. "You're right," his voice softened. "You've been judged every day of your life. I never knew what that felt like until now." She stared at him, disbelief in her eyes. "So what? You want a medal for empathy?" "No," he said quietly. "I want to earn your forgiveness." The silence stretched between them, tense, heavy, unspoken, until the door creaked open. The same gray hoodie appeared in the doorway, soaked and trembling. A woman stepped in, pulling back her hood. She looked about 35, with rough hands and eyes that had seen too much. "Grant Whitmore," she said flatly. "You don't know me, but your wife did." Grant's chest tightened. "Who are you?" Her name was Evelyn. She saved my life 12 years ago when your company demolished the South Oak projects. I was pregnant, broke, and invisible. She found me work in her charity clinic. Imani frowned. "And you saved him tonight?" The woman nodded. "Because Evelyn would have wanted me to. But you—" She turned to Grant, voice trembling. "You've got rot inside your company and Vanessa's feeding it." Grant stood slowly. "What are you saying?" The woman dropped a flash drive on the table. "Everything's in there. Emails, contracts, proof that the crash wasn't an accident. Your wife found out about the money laundering and was planning to expose it." Grant's eyes widened. "You're saying—" "I'm saying she died because someone made sure she would." The room froze. Imani's hand went to her mouth. Carter stopped mid-step. The woman's voice broke. "She tried to warn you, but Vanessa made sure you never saw her last message." Before anyone could speak, glass shattered. A gunshot ripped through the window. The woman gasped and dropped to her knees. Grant dove to the floor. Imani screamed. Carter yelled, "Lights off!" Darkness swallowed the church. Outside, tires screeched, then silence. The woman in the gray hoodie bled against the floorboards, her breath faint. She clutched Grant's sleeve and whispered, "Don't let them erase her again." Her hand went still. The flash drive rolled across the floor, stopping at Imani's feet. The church was empty except for echoes and ghosts. Police taped off the street by dawn, but the story already had its own pulse online. Blurry photos, wild theories, hashtags turning every whisper into a headline. Grant sat in Carter's office, staring at the flash drive like it held both salvation and sin. Imani sat across from him, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes red from crying. "You gonna open it?" she asked softly. He nodded, voice flat. "Yeah, but once we see what's on it, there's no going back." Carter closed the blinds. "Then it's time you stop running." Grant plugged the drive into Carter's old desktop computer. Folders filled the screen, labeled audit logs, emails, and one marked Evelyn. He opened the last one. A video began to play. Evelyn sat in her office, her face pale but steady. "If you're seeing this," she said, "it means I didn't make it home." Imani covered her mouth. Evelyn's voice continued, calm but trembling. "Grant, I found something. Vanessa's been moving money through the medical division under your name. The accounts are tied to shell companies in the Caymans. I have proof, and I'm meeting an investigator tonight." She smiled faintly. "If I don't come back, promise me you'll find the girl from Haven Shelter, the one who sings that broken lullaby. She's the reminder of what this world could still be." The screen went black. Grant's hands shook so hard the mouse fell. His breath caught like the world had suddenly stopped breathing with him. Imani whispered, She was talking about me?" He nodded weakly. "She wanted you safe. She must have known Vanessa would come after her." Carter leaned forward. "Grant, this video changes everything. You can't hide it." Grant stared at the frozen screen. "No, but if I release it now, she'll spin it. Vanessa has judges, cops, even reporters on her payroll." Imani stood. "Then you need the one thing she doesn't. People who believe in the truth, not the money." Her eyes met his, firm and alive. "Let me help." He blinked, surprised. "You've helped enough." "No," she said fiercely. "You still don't get it. They don't see me as a threat. I can go where you can't." Carter smiled faintly. "God works through the underestimated." Grant hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, we'll leak it, but carefully." They worked through the night, copying files, writing a statement. Outside, the storm finally cleared, but thunder still rolled somewhere far away, like a warning that peace hadn't arrived yet. Around dawn, Carter stepped out for coffee. When he returned, both Grant and Imani were gone, the computer still warm, the flash drive missing. A note lay on the table. It read, "We're ending this our way." Moments later, Vanessa Doyle stood in her penthouse office, sipping coffee, reading a message from an unknown number. It said, "He knows. She's with him." Her smile didn't falter. She turned to her assistant. "Call the board. Tell them it's time to clean house. Permanently." Morning came too quiet for a city like Dallas. The kind of quiet that feels borrowed, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something ugly to happen. Grant and Imani sat in a borrowed pickup on the east side, a place where the roads cracked like old bones and streetlights flickered half-dead. The baby slept in the back seat, bundled in a blanket Carter had given them. Grant's eyes stayed on the rearview mirror. "You sure this guy's real?" Imani nodded. "Carter said he used to work inside the company, a whistleblower. He wants to meet by the rail yard." Grant sighed, gripping the steering wheel. "Feels like a trap." "Everything feels like a trap when you're guilty," she snapped. He turned to her, taken aback. "You think I deserved all this?" Imani looked straight ahead. "I think you lived too high to see the dirt you were standing on. And now, it's swallowing you whole." Grant leaned back, quiet for a long moment. "Maybe I did." He looked at her reflection in the window. "But if I die trying to fix it, will that count for something?" Imani's voice softened. "Maybe not in your world. But in mine? It's a start." They pulled into the rail yard, a maze of metal and shadow. A man in a worn coat stood beside a freight car, cigarette glowing between his fingers. "You're late," he said. Imani crossed her arms. "We had to dodge bullets and cops, sorry for the delay." The man smirked. "Fair point. Name's Marcus Boyd. Used to run internal security for Doyle Holdings, till I found out Vanessa was laundering political money." Grant stepped closer. "How deep?" Marcus took a drag, eyes sharp. "Deep enough to bury a city." He reached into his coat, pulling out a manila envelope. "This is your wife's last report. She sent it to me the day before she died." Grant froze. "You knew her?" Marcus nodded. "She wanted me to keep it safe in case she didn't make it. She said you wouldn't believe how bad it really was." Imani frowned. "So why now? Why help us?" Marcus looked at the baby in the back seat. "Because I've done enough wrong to recognize innocence when I see it." He handed Grant the file, dozens of pages, photos, and signatures. Offshore accounts, false contracts, judges, cops, even city officials. Grant's voice shook. "She was going to blow it all open." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, and Vanessa made sure she never got the chance." Before they could say another word, a sound ripped through the air. A distant drone hum, growing louder by the second. Marcus's face changed. "They found us." Grant spun around. "Who?" A black SUV tore around the corner, headlights slicing through the fog. Gunfire exploded. Glass shattered. Imani screamed, covering the baby. Grant hit the gas, swerving between the freight cars. The SUV followed, bullets hitting metal like thunder. Marcus fired back, shouting for them to go. "Keep driving," he yelled. Grant floored it, the truck fishtailing across gravel. Imani held the baby tight, crying out as sparks lit up the mirrors. Then, silence. Marcus was gone. The SUV stopped. Grant slowed down, chest heaving. "Did we lose them?" Imani looked behind. "No, they let us go." Grant frowned. "Why would they?" She cut him off, voice trembling. "Because they don't need to chase you anymore, Grant. They're going after Reverend Carter." The color drained from his face. "No." Imani's hand trembled on his shoulder. "We have to warn him." Grant hit the gas again, tires spinning on wet gravel. "Hold on tight." The baby started crying, soft at first, then louder, like it could feel the fear in the air. Dallas flashed past them, lights, sirens, memories, and somewhere above the noise the truth finally had a voice. The church was already burning when they got there. Smoke clawed at the sky, sirens screamed from every corner, and people gathered across the street in disbelief. The stained glass windows that once glowed with morning light now bled fire and ash. Grant stopped the truck, running toward the flames. "Carter!" he shouted, voice breaking. "Carter!" Imani grabbed his arm. "You can't—" He pulled free. "He saved us." Firefighters held him back. The heat was unbearable, like standing inside rage itself. A voice shouted from behind, "Grant!" He turned. Carter stumbled out the side door, coughing, covered in soot. Two men held him upright. He looked dazed but alive. Imani ran to him, tears streaming. "Oh my God, you're okay," Carter wheezed. "They came looking for you. They tore up my office. Took the hard drives." Grant gripped his shoulders. "Who?" Carter shook his head weakly. "Didn't see. Black suits, military precision. Said Vanessa sent a message." He reached into his coat, pulling out a charred envelope. "They missed this one." Inside was a single photo, Grant's baby, taken days before the crash. On the back, in red ink, "End this, or she ends you." Imani's breath hitched. "She's not bluffing, Grant. You saw what she's capable of." Grant stared at the burning church. "She wants me broken. She thinks fear makes people obedient." Carter grabbed his wrist. "Don't go after her alone. That's what she wants." Grant's eyes hardened. "I'm not going after her. I'm going after the truth." He looked at Imani, her face lit by firelight, fierce and terrified at once. "You said the world doesn't see you as a threat. That's your strength. You'll deliver the files. I'll draw her out." Imani shook her head. "No, I'm not leaving you. You have to." Their eyes locked. Two broken souls who had somehow found meaning in each other's pain. Carter put a hand on Imani's shoulder. "Let him go. Sometimes God lets the fire burn so the truth can be seen from miles away." Grant turned toward the flames, the heat shimmering around him like a halo of defiance. Imani whispered, "Grant, promise me you'll come back." He didn't answer. He just looked at her, one last heavy look, then walked into the smoke. The baby cried louder. The church bell cracked in two and fell. And somewhere deep in the haze a voice called out, a woman's voice, faint, ghost-like. "Grant, don't trust her." Imani froze. She turned toward the sound. There, through the drifting smoke, she swore she saw a figure, a woman in a white dress, face half lit by firelight. Then she was gone. The ground trembled. The night wasn't over. It was just beginning. Grant stood alone on the edge of downtown Dallas, staring up at the mirrored skyscraper that bore his family name, Whitmore Tower. A name that once meant power now felt like a curse. Inside his coat, the envelope Marcus had given him pressed against his chest like a second heartbeat. The truth. His wife's truth. And now, his burden. He slipped past security using an old pass card, his face still recognized by the system that used to worship him. The lobby smelled like money and marble. He could almost hear echoes of old boardroom laughter, champagne nights, the arrogance of wealth. Now he walked those same floors invisible. On the top floor, his assistant Evelyn Torres waited. She looked pale, nervous. "Grant, they're saying you set the fire." He ignored it. "Where's Vanessa?" "Conference room. Press team's prepping statements. They're spinning this hard." Grant's jaw tightened. "Let them. I'm about to ruin their script." He pushed open the glass doors. Inside, Vanessa's father, Senator Doyle, sat flanked by lawyers and corporate sharks. Vanessa herself stood at the end of the table, her eyes cold as metal. "Well," she said softly, "the prodigal husband returns." Grant dropped the envelope on the table. "You killed her." Vanessa didn't flinch. Careful with your words. I'm done being careful, he snapped. I have proof of your deals, the offshores, the laundering, everything she died trying to expose. Senator Doyle leaned back, smirking. And you think anyone will believe the word of a disgraced CEO and his homeless girlfriend? Grant slammed his fist on the table. She saved my life. The room went silent. Vanessa crossed her arms. You're defending her? The girl who tried to steal your car and baby? Grant's voice broke. No, she saved us. You lied to me. You used me to clean your mess, and when I got too close, my wife died for it. Vanessa's mask cracked for just a moment, a flicker of guilt. Then she regained composure. Grant, she said quietly, you think you're the hero in this story? You're not. You were never supposed to care. He stepped closer, whispering, then maybe caring is the only thing that makes me human. Evelyn spoke up from behind. He's right. I saw the transfers. Vanessa approved them all. The lawyers shifted. Doyle's expression hardened. Evelyn, that's enough. But Evelyn didn't stop. I'm tired of watching innocent people burn for your sins. Vanessa turned toward her. You have no idea what you're walking into. Evelyn trembled but stood firm. Neither did your wife when she signed her last report. The tension broke like a storm. Vanessa lunged. Grant stepped between them. The envelope tore, papers flying across the table. Senator Doyle rose, shouting, Security! Grant grabbed the scattered pages and ran. Evelyn followed. They burst through the stairwell door just as alarms blared. Where are we going? She shouted. Somewhere the truth can't be silenced, Grant said, his voice shaking but steady. They reached the garage. As they got into the car, Evelyn handed him a USB drive. She doesn't know I made a copy. It's all here. Grant nodded. Then we end it. As he drove out into the night, the city lights blurred, and for the first time in years, he wasn't running for profit or power. He was running for justice. But on the 32nd floor, Vanessa stood by the window holding her phone to her ear. Find the girl, she whispered. Her voice was calm. Deadly calm. And this time, make sure the baby's with her. By the next morning, every TV screen in Dallas screamed the same headline. Billionaire turned fugitive, homeless girl at the center of scandal. Imani sat in Carter's new church office, her hands shaking as she held Caleb. Reporters crowded outside, shouting questions, cameras flashing. Carter locked the door. They're hunting you again, child. You can't stay here. She nodded weakly. I know, but where would I even go? A knock at the back door made them freeze. Carter peeked through the curtain. It was Grant. Imani's breath caught. He's alive. He stepped inside, exhausted but alive. We don't have much time. Imani stood. What happened? I went to her, he said. Vanessa. She knows everything. She's coming for you and the baby. Carter frowned. Then what's your plan? Grant looked at Imani. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm taking her down publicly. But I need your help. Imani shook her head. You don't need me. You need a lawyer, a miracle, something real. Grant's voice softened. You are real. He stepped closer. You were the first person in years to look at me and see a man, not a brand. You saved me, you saved my son, and you taught me what it means to fight for something that matters. Tears filled her eyes. And what exactly do you want me to do? Grant took a deep breath. Come with me. Be Caleb's caretaker, publicly. They'll expect you to run. But if you stand beside me, we flip their whole story. A black homeless girl raising a billionaire's son? It'll force the world to look twice. Carter crossed his arms. That's dangerous for both of you. Grant nodded. So is staying silent. Imani hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. She'd been judged, handcuffed, spit on. The world never gave her grace, only grief. And now this man wanted her to stand beside him in front of those same cameras. She looked at the baby, his tiny fingers gripping hers, his innocent eyes blinking up at her. Her voice trembled. If I say yes, what happens when the world turns on us again? Grant met her gaze. Then we turn on the world right back. The air hung still. Even Carter's expression softened. Finally, Imani whispered, "All right, I'll do it. But if you betray me like everyone else did," Grant interrupted gently. "I won't. Not again." He reached into his coat and handed her a small card. "Press conference, noon, City Hall. They'll expect my apology." Imani frowned. "And what will you give them instead?" He looked at her, tired, defiant, and human. "The truth." Carter whispered a short prayer as they left. "Lord, keep them safe." Outside, the cold wind cut across the street. Reporters' voices echoed in the distance. Imani pulled her hood tighter, clutching the baby close. Grant walked beside her, facing the storm he helped create. And somewhere in the shadows, a black SUV rolled slowly behind them. Vanessa's voice crackled over a radio. "Don't let them reach that podium." The hunt was back on. By noon, the steps of Dallas City Hall looked like a battlefield made of microphones and flashing cameras. Protesters chanted on both sides of the barricades, one side screaming, "Justice for Imani," while the other held signs reading, "Whitmore fraud exposed." The air was thick with anger and cold wind. Grant's black SUV pulled up quietly to the curb. Inside, he sat beside Imani, Caleb in her lap. He hadn't said a word for the last 5 minutes. Neither had she. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. Imani shook her head. "Yes, I do. If I don't show my face now, they'll write my story for me." Her tone carried no fear, just exhaustion turned into fire. Cameras turned the second the car door opened. Reporters surged forward like waves. "Grant, is she your mistress? Is she the thief? Is that your baby?" The chaos was suffocating. Grant stepped out first, shielding her from the flashes. Imani followed, clutching Caleb to her chest. The sound was deafening. Shouts, questions, accusations, the electric hum of outrage. On the podium, the city mayor stood ready, smiling tightly for the cameras. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for agreeing to speak." Grant ignored it. He turned toward the sea of cameras. "My name is Grant Whitmore," he began, voice trembling. "And I have spent my life building walls made of money and lies. I believed people were numbers. I believed pain was weakness, until a girl who had nothing gave me everything." Whispers rippled through the crowd. He looked at Imani. "This is Imani Reed. She saved my life. She saved my son's life. While I bled on that road, people like me drove past her every day, pretending she didn't exist." The mayor stepped forward. "Mr. Whitmore, this isn't—" Grant raised his hand. "Don't interrupt me." Reporters went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. "For years I helped build a city that punished the poor, ignored the homeless, and blamed the weak. I funded systems that would have crushed a girl like Imani before she could even dream. And now I'm here to say—" A gunshot cracked through the air. Screams erupted. Imani hit the ground, shielding Caleb. Grant froze. Security guards swarmed. People ran in all directions. Carter, standing near the back, yelled, "Get down!" Grant turned. The shot had come from a nearby rooftop. Another bullet shattered the podium. Panic spiraled. He grabbed Imani's arm. "We have to move." Police shoved them toward the building, but in the chaos, Imani stumbled. The baby wailed. Grant scooped them both up and pushed through the side doors, breath ragged, blood pounding in his ears. Behind them, sirens wailed. Inside the marble lobby, he slammed his back against the wall, gasping. "You okay?" Imani nodded, trembling. "Who would shoot at you?" His jaw tightened. "Not at me. At you." She froze. "What?" "They're trying to erase you before you can speak." Carter caught up, panting. "She hired someone. Vanessa. I saw her men near the barricade." Grant clenched his fists. "Then we finish this now." He looked around. "Carter, take Caleb to safety." There's a car around back. Imani shook her head. No, he stays with me. Grant met her eyes. He's safer away from us. Imani hesitated, but one look at Caleb's crying face broke her. She handed him to Carter, whispering, "Please don't let him out of your sight." Carter nodded and ran. Grant grabbed Imani's hand. "We're going upstairs." "To what?" she shouted. He turned toward the elevator. "To the press floor. The truth doesn't die in the dark." As the elevator doors closed, the last sound they heard was another gunshot echoing outside, and the city that once looked untouchable finally began to shake. The newsroom smelled like burnt coffee and adrenaline. Grant and Imani burst through the glass doors of Channel 12 News. Reporters stared, jaws dropping. The anchor, mid-broadcast, stammered, breaking news, folks." Grant tossed a flash drive onto the producer's desk. "Play this. Live. Now." The producer blinked. "Sir, we can't just—" "You can if you want to keep your job," Grant barked. Imani stood behind him, shaking, but her eyes burned with a quiet strength. The broadcast cut to black, then back to a pre-recorded video feed showing Grant's wife, Laura Whitmore, sitting at a desk with a calm, haunted expression. "If you're watching this," Laura said softly, "it means I didn't make it. My husband deserves the truth, even if it destroys everything we built." The room fell silent. The video played out like confession and curse: files, signatures, offshore accounts, bribes, political deals. Vanessa's name appeared on screen, bold as blood. The entire city saw it. Grant's throat tightened. Imani whispered, "She told the truth, even when it cost her life." As the video ended, the producer turned pale. "This will go viral in minutes." Grant exhaled. "Good, that's the point." He turned to leave, but outside the studio's glass walls, police cars screeched to a stop. Vanessa stepped out, flanked by officers. Her hands were calm, her smile sharper than ever. She entered the studio slowly, her heels echoing. "Well," she said, "you found the tape." Grant stood between her and Imani. "It's over." She tilted her head. "No, darling. It's just getting started." Police surrounded them. One officer, hesitant, uncertain, looked at Vanessa, then at Grant. "Ma'am, are you under arrest?" Vanessa smiled faintly. "For what? Speaking my truth?" Grant glared. "You forged it. You framed Imani. You killed Laura." Vanessa sighed, stepping closer. "I told you before. You were never supposed to care. And now look what you've done. You've made the help famous." Imani's hand trembled, but she met her gaze. "I'm not the help. I'm the reason you'll never sleep again." The officer hesitated, then reached for Vanessa's wrist. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Vanessa didn't resist. She just smiled coldly as she was led away. "You think they'll believe your story? You think they'll forgive you for choosing her over your own kind?" Grant's voice was low. "I'm not asking for forgiveness." He looked down at Imani. "I'm fighting for peace." The cameras were still rolling. Every word, every tear, broadcast to millions. As Vanessa disappeared into the flashing blue lights, Imani turned to Grant. Her voice broke. "What happens now?" Grant whispered. "Now. The world decides who we really are." But outside, in the quiet alley where Carter had parked, something moved. A figure in a black coat opened the back door of the car. Caleb's soft cry echoed once, then faded into the cold air. Rain hammered the city as night swallowed the skyline. Grant stood outside the news building, drenched and trembling, watching flashing lights vanish into the distance. Vanessa was gone. So was Caleb. Carter's car sat open at the curb, the back door swinging, the baby seat empty, rain soaking into the leather. He dropped to his knees. "No, no, no, no." His voice cracked through the storm. Carter stumbled toward him, his face pale. I turned for 1 second, man, just one." Grant grabbed his collar. "Where is he?" "I don't know. A black SUV, Tinted windows, gone before I could blink. Imani's scream tore through the night. Caleb! She ran to the car, searching, crying, shaking as her hands hit the seat. He was right here. Grant turned to the nearest officer. Lock down every bridge and highway, every exit out of the city. Move. The officer hesitated. Sir, we need authorization. Do it, Grant roared. Imani sank to the ground, sobbing. The rain soaked her hair, her clothes, her skin. He's just a baby, Grant. He's just a baby. Grant crouched beside her, his voice shaking. We'll find him. I swear it. Carter wiped his face. This isn't random. Someone planned this. Grant looked up, eyes blazing. Vanessa. But deep down, something told him this wasn't her. She wouldn't risk that much exposure after what happened live on TV. Imani turned to him, her voice trembling. Then who? Grant looked past the flashing lights and rain, toward the shadows between the buildings. Someone was watching. Hours later, the rain stopped. The city went quiet, but inside the Whitmore estate, chaos reigned. Detectives filled the hallways. Surveillance teams scanned footage. Imani sat on the couch, staring blankly at a stuffed giraffe Caleb used to chew on. Grant paced the floor, gripping his phone. Any updates? Detective Morales shook his head. We traced the plates. Fake. Traffic cams caught the SUV heading north, then vanished. Whoever took your son knew how to disappear. Imani looked up slowly. You mean they knew your world, Grant, not mine? He froze. She continued, her voice quiet but fierce. You made enemies long before I ever showed up. People who trade lives for profit. Maybe now you're paying the price. Grant's hand shook. Then I'll pay it. Whatever they want. A phone rang. Morales answered, frowning. Unknown number. Grant snatched it from him. This is Grant Whitmore. A man's voice, deep, distorted, filled the room. Your son is safe. For now. Imani stood. Who are you? The voice chuckled. A consequence. You built towers over broken people, and now one of those people decided to break you back. Grant's grip tightened. What do you want? Justice, the voice said. The kind you never gave. The line clicked off. Imani's face went pale. That voice... Grant turned. You know it? She nodded slowly. I think it's Marcus. Grant blinked. Marcus Reed? Your brother's dead. Imani's eyes glistened. No. They said he died in prison, but I never saw his body. The room went silent. Carter whispered, if he's alive. Grant's jaw clenched. Then he's coming for both of us. That night, Imani couldn't sleep. She wandered the empty halls of Grant's mansion, haunted by memories. Marcus laughing on their porch as kids, swearing he'd protect her forever. Now he was the one threatening her child. When she looked up, she saw something strange on the window. A smear of mud, shaped like a handprint. She stepped closer. In the reflection, a figure stood in the yard. Tall, hooded, motionless. Her heart froze. Grant! By the time he rushed in, the yard was empty. Only the wind moving the trees. But on the glass, written in mud, were 3 words. Bring her alone. Grant wanted to refuse, but the message made it clear. This wasn't about ransom. It was personal. Imani was the target. At dawn, she stood at the edge of the abandoned Jefferson rail yard, her hoodie pulled tight, her eyes hollow but fierce. Carter had begged her not to go. Grant had followed her anyway. Stay back, she warned him. Not a chance, he replied. You're not walking into this alone. She turned to him, voice trembling. He's my brother, Grant. If I go in with you, he'll kill Caleb just to prove a point. Grant's jaw tightened. Then we find another way. But she was already walking away. The yard was silent, mist crawling over broken trains and rusted tracks. From the shadows, Marcus stepped out, taller, leaner, his face carved with years of rage. Imani froze. Marcus, he smiled faintly. You still remember my name? Her voice broke. They said you died. He shrugged. I did. The day they took everything from me. She shook her head, tears falling. I didn't know what they did to you. Didn't you? His tone cracked with pain. While I was rotting in a cell, you were playing hero for the man who built the system that put me there. Imani stepped forward. Grant isn't like them. Marcus laughed bitterly. He is them, and you became his shield. Look at you, Imani. You think love changes the world? Love is the lie they sell to keep us quiet. Behind him, a soft cry echoed. Caleb. Imani gasped. Please, just give him back. Marcus's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. He's safe, for now. Why are you doing this? She whispered. He stepped closer. Because you forgot where you came from. You forgot who you were fighting for. You think one man's guilt makes him good? She trembled. No, but it makes him human. For the first time, Marcus's mask cracked. Pain, regret, confusion. Then headlights flared. Grant stepped out from behind a freight car, gun drawn. Let her go, Marcus. Marcus smirked. You followed her. I knew you would. Grant's voice shook with fury. You don't want this fight. Oh, but I do, Marcus said, raising his hand, holding a detonator. Stop, Imani screamed. Marcus's thumb hovered over the switch. You took everything from me, Whitmore. Now you'll watch it burn. Grant's heart raced. You're better than this. You're her brother. Marcus's voice broke. Not anymore. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. He looked down, confusion flickering across his face. Imani's whisper carried through the wind. Because I cut the wire. Marcus's eyes widened, realization dawning too late. Grant charged forward. They collided, fighting viciously, rolling over gravel and rust. A gunshot rang out. Imani screamed. Smoke, silence. Then Grant fell to his knees, blood on his arm, but alive. Marcus lay a few feet away, clutching his side, gasping. Imani dropped beside him. Marcus, no. He smiled weakly. Guess. I still couldn't hurt you. His eyes dimmed as the first sirens approached. Imani broke into sobs, clutching his hand. Grant stood there, watching the siblings, broken by the same world on opposite sides of it. And as the sirens drew closer, Caleb's faint cry echoed through the mist, alive, but changed forever. The sirens faded into the dawn as the ambulance pulled away from the rail yard. Imani sat on the curb, her hands covered in her brother's blood, her eyes blank and hollow. Grant stood nearby, his arm bandaged, silent. He'd fought for his life, but the victory felt like loss. The sun rose slowly behind the broken trains, cold orange light spilling across the wreckage. For a moment, time itself seemed frozen. Detective Morales approached carefully. They got the boy. He's safe. Imani didn't react. Her body trembled, but her face was still. Grant looked at her, the woman who'd risked everything to save a man who once looked down on her, and realized something deep in his chest had changed forever. Imani finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. He just wanted to be heard. Grant nodded, his jaw tight. He made the world listen, the wrong way, but he did. She turned to him. And you? Will you go back to that mansion and pretend none of this happened? He looked away, guilt pressing down like a storm. I don't know if I can go back at all. The ambulance doors closed. The medics' voices faded into the distance. Then Imani stood. Grant, take care of Caleb. He frowned. What about you? I need to bury what's left of my brother. She walked away without another word, her silhouette fading into the light. Weeks passed. Grant returned to his estate, but it no longer felt like home. The marble floors, the chandeliers, they all seemed to mock him. He sat in Caleb's nursery one night, the baby asleep in his crib, the faint hum of the monitor breaking the silence. On the desk beside him lay stacks of old documents, foreclosure papers, eviction files, profit reports, everything he'd built his empire on. He picked one up, staring at the signature. His name, his empire, his guilt. Grant leaned back and whispered to himself, maybe Marcus was right. Suddenly, he heard a faint knock at the door. When he opened it, Imani stood there, tired, thinner, but stronger. She stepped inside quietly. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said softly. She looked around. Still feels like another world in here. Not for long, he replied, handing her an envelope. She opened it, her hands shaking. Inside were property deeds, transfer letters, and a check. Her voice wavered. What is this? Restitution, Grant said. For every family I displaced, every home I took, starting with yours. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't owe me. Yes, I do, he interrupted. I owe you my life. I owe Caleb's life, and I owe your brother a truth he never got. Imani stepped closer. You can't fix the past with money. He nodded. Then help me fix the future. The air hung heavy between them, forgiveness and resentment warring silently. Imani finally exhaled. Maybe that's what he wanted all along. Not revenge, not pain. Just someone to finally listen. She looked at Caleb sleeping in the crib. He deserves a better world than the one we grew up in. Grant smiled faintly. Then let's build it for him. And for the first time in years, the mansion felt alive again, not because of wealth, but because of purpose. Still, neither of them knew that the real test of redemption was waiting just beyond the morning. 3 months later, spring bloomed over the city. The air carried a quiet peace, fragile but real. Imani worked alongside Grant in what used to be the Whitmore Holdings Tower, now renamed the Haven Project, a foundation helping low-income families rebuild their lives. Every day she stood where power once crushed people, now using that same space to lift them up. Carter joined the board. Morales became head of community outreach. And Grant, once the symbol of greed, now walked the same streets he once ignored, rebuilding homes brick by brick. Still at night, the ghosts lingered. Marcus's face haunted his dreams, his words echoing, "Justice, not mercy." One evening, after another long day, Grant came home to find Imani sitting on the porch holding a small envelope. It came today, she said quietly. Addressed to you, no return name. He took it, tearing it open carefully. Inside was a single piece of paper, Marcus's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. Grant, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. But I've been thinking, maybe I was wrong too. I wanted justice, but I forgot what justice costs. My sister loved you because you tried to change. Don't stop. Don't let her down. Don't let me die for nothing. Monsieur Grant's hands trembled. He looked at Imani, eyes full of guilt and gratitude. He knew we'd find a way. Imani nodded, tears sliding down her face. Maybe this was his way of coming home. The baby stirred inside the house, his soft cry echoing through the hall. Imani stood, brushing her face. Go on. He needs you. Grant walked into the nursery. Caleb was standing in his crib, arms stretched out. He lifted the boy into his arms, holding him close. Through the window, the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the room. Grant whispered, "You'll grow up knowing what I never did, that love means fighting for others, not just yourself." Imani leaned against the doorway, watching quietly. Her heart ached with loss, but somewhere deep inside, peace had finally found her. Grant turned to her. We both lost someone that day, but maybe we gained something too. She smiled faintly. A second chance? He nodded. Exactly that. They stood there, two souls bound by pain, forgiveness, and the life they saved together. As the night fell over the city, the streetlights flickered on, one by one, like tiny sparks of hope reborn. and for once neither of them looked back.